Okay, so here's a question for you. Can the simple act of prayer actually physically change what's inside your veins, your blood?
It does sound a bit like something from a miracle story, maybe.
Right. But today we're actually going to dig into the research of a Ukrainian doctor who looked into exactly that.
We are. We're looking at Dr. Mihail Lazorik's work, mostly using info from a blog post called Prayer Changes Blood. The idea is to really explore the science he tried to apply and, well, what it might mean for you.
Absolutely. And this Dr. Lazorik, he's not just some random person with a wild idea. He's got a doctorate in medical sciences.
Hmm.
He's an associate professor at Uzhhorod National University over in Ukraine. And get this, he holds 166 patents.
Wow, 166, that's a lot.
It is. And apparently many were developed with his students, which kind of speaks to his focus on practical research, I think.
Definitely. That background, that scientific credibility, it sort of sets the stage for this more unusual line of inquiry he took.
Yeah, and what got him started on this path is really interesting.
It is. Apparently about, what, 15 years back? He started wondering.
Yeah, he asked this question. Look, we know spa treatments, things like that, can change blood chemistry, right?
Right. Measurable changes.
So could prayer do something similar? And it wasn't just a passing thought. It actually led him to set up a whole patented scientific experiment to find out.
And what's key here is how he set it up. Dr. Lazorik was very clear, it seems, about wanting to avoid, subjective stuff.
Like bringing in priests or anything?
Exactly. No clergy involved. He wanted it to be purely about observable physiological changes. A proper scientific investigation aiming for results you could potentially replicate.
And the people who took part, they were quite a mix, weren't they?
Yeah. 15 volunteers, men, women, all sorts of backgrounds. He had doctors, lawyers, people used to analyzing things.
But also people with no formal education.
Right. And importantly, quite a few were dealing with some serious health problems. Atherosclerosis, hepatitis B, heart conditions, other long-term illnesses.
And their identities were kept private, which is standard, of course.
Standard, yes. And the method itself was pretty straightforward, a two-step process.
Okay, so what did they actually do?
First, they took blood samples, both from a vein, venous blood, and from a capillary, like a finger prick.
Okay, before anything else happened.
Before prayer, yes.
Yeah.
Then the volunteers would pray for about 15 to 20 minutes.
And then?
Then a second set of blood samples, venous and capillary again, were taken right after for a direct before and after comparison.
Makes sense. And what kind of prayers were involved?
Pretty standard traditional Christian prayers, things like the Our Father, the Creed.
The Heavenly King, Psalm 50, I saw those mentioned.
Exactly. And also prayers asking for intercession from saints and, other holy figures.
And people prayed differently too, right? It wasn't just one way.
That's another interesting layer, yeah. Some prayed silently, completely internally. Others read from a prayer book. And in some cases, a friend actually prayed for the person. So quite a bit of variation in how the prayer itself was, enacted.
Okay, so the setup seems pretty clear. Let's get to the results, because the blog post describes them as, pretty striking.
They really were, especially with the very first patient mentioned. This was someone suffering from osteomyelitis, a really nasty bone infection after a bad accident.
Right, horrible condition. What happened with their blood tests?
Well, the big thing was a marker called phagocytosis activity. Now, phagocytosis, for you listening, is basically how your immune cells sort of gobble up bad stuff, like bacteria or debris. It's a key sign of inflammation and immune response.
Okay.
After prayer, this patient's phagocytosis level apparently dropped, get this, by a factor of 6.
6 times lower.
6 times lower. That's not just noise in the data. That's a massive change.
Wow. Okay, was that just a one-off, or did they see this pattern elsewhere?
No, it seems it was isolated. Across the whole group, the study reported significant changes for the men involved. Their inflammation markers, on average, dropped by a factor of 3. Still very significant.
3 times lower for men.
Okay.
And for women.
Even more pronounced, actually. The decrease was even greater for the female participants.
Huh. Any idea why?
Well, Dr. Lazorik apparently suggested it might relate to maybe greater emotional sensitivity or responsiveness in women. It's speculative, of course.
Speculative, yeah, but interested.
But the main point holds. These weren't minor dips. They were seeing substantial shifts in these key blood markers across the board.
So what's the thinking behind this? Why would prayer potentially do this? What was Dr. Lazorik's explanation?
His idea really centers on that link between inflammation and prayer.
Okay.
Think about inflammation. Is your immune system basically going on high alert, reacting aggressively, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's to an infection, an injury, or even, say, emotional trauma.
Right, the body's defense mechanism kicking in hard.
Exactly. So Lazorik's hypothesis is that prayer acts as a kind of calming influence. It dials down that internal aggression, that immune system overdrive.
I see.
And that dialing down is what leads to the measurable drop in those inflammation markers they were tracking in the blood.
He apparently put it quite bluntly, too. There's a quote, "Prayer is not an opiate for the people. It causes real biological changes in the human body."
That's a strong statement,
Yes,
especially from a medical doctor with multiple patents to his name.
it really is. It sort of pushes back against the idea that it's just a psychological comfort.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It suggests a tangible physiological effect.
Mm.
And the research also kind of touches on how this might happen, like the mechanism.
Right, the how. It mentioned the senses in the brain, didn't it?
Think about what's involved when someone prays. You're using your mind, right? Conscious thought, focus.
Sure.
You might be using your voice speaking, chanting. That's sound vibration.
Or reading a prayer book, so your eyes are engaged.
Eyes, exactly. And your ears, if you're listening to prayers or maybe chanting yourself, hearing is involved.
So lots of different inputs.
A whole combination of sensory and neurological activity. The thinking, as suggested by the study anyway, is that all these elements come together. They create this kind of powerful, integrated experience.
And that experience resonates somehow.
Resonates through the nervous system potentially,
Mm.
and from there influences things like the bloodstream and the immune response.
Yeah.
That seems to be the line of reasoning.
And then underlining all this, you mentioned he actually got a patent for these findings.
Yes, which is quite significant, I think.
Yeah.
It moves it beyond just an interesting observation. Patenting suggests they saw it as a demonstrable, potentially beneficial effect.
Yeah.
It underscores the idea that this wasn't just random fluctuation.
So the patent points towards tangible health benefits being observed.
That seems to be the implication. The big takeaway from the source material is really that prayer might have these physical benefits, not just spiritual ones.
Bringing peace, maybe healing, restoration to body and soul, as the blog put it.
Exactly.
Right.
It connects the physical and the non-physical.
It does make you reflect, doesn't it? On times maybe during prayer or even just sitting quietly in a church or temple where you felt that deep sense of calm or, well, even physical relief.
Lazorik's work, whatever you make of the specifics, offers one possible scientific lens to look at those kinds of experiences.
Okay, so wrapping this part up. The core finding here from Dr. Lazorik's research as presented is that prayer seems linked to real, measurable changes in blood chemistry.
Specifically, a notable reduction in markers associated with inflammation. That's the headline result.
It definitely gives you food for thought about, well, the implications for your own health and just how connected our minds and bodies really are.
It really does. And it leaves us with a final thought, maybe something for you to ponder.
Go on.
Could it be that the very act of engaging multiple senses and our neurological pathways, the thinking, seeing, hearing, maybe speaking involved in prayer, is actually a key part of why it might have these biological effects?
Like the process itself is the trigger.
Perhaps. And if that's the case, what other kinds of practices, things that similarly engage our minds and senses deeply, could they potentially produce similar positive effects on our physical well-being?
Interesting question. Things like meditation, maybe certain types of music, listening, chanting.
Could be. It certainly opens up a fascinating area for thinking about that mind-body connection further.